All good. Then we can start. So thank you so much, Adeola, for being here with me and having this conversation with me today. And
Oh, great.
I was wondering if you could just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your practice.
Um, yeah, my name is Adeola Olagunju. I'm Nigerian. I'm a visual artist working with the medium of photography primarily. I also work with video, sound, and installations. So, yeah, I explore different media and across different themes in photography. So, I like to say I'm quite experimental. I don't have a rigid idea of what I should be doing. So I'm very intuitive. So if something interests me, I go for it. So that explains pretty much the ethos that guides my practice. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Estefania Hidalgo. I'm a Venezuelan student. I'm studying here in Bristol photography, and I'm just happy to talk about photography and work today. So thank you for being here.
Awesome.
And so if you feel comfortable, maybe you could tell me about what has your experience been this past few years, or this past year with the pandemic, and have you been able to keep doing work, and how has it been for you and the people around you?
Um, I guess just like everywhere in the world, the pandemic has been quite intense. Um, Confusing at the start, because I was in Nigeria myself, because I live between Nigeria and Germany now. And last February, I was in Nigeria, and to work and also to conduct a photography workshop with women in Lagos. And so at the beginning of the lockdown, I couldn't get out before. So I was stuck in Nigeria, so to speak, for months, for like 5 months, in between that space of floating, some sort of purgatory. And so even though at some point I started working, but before then it was the struggle of finding a balance between finding home, and that's some sort of irony, because I'm Nigerian, right? So if I get stuck in Nigeria, I should feel okay. But I was confronted with this idea of home. What is home? Is this geography? Is it architecture? And so I had this whole process of reflection and thinking about what does it mean to be home, because now that I found myself in a space which is supposed to be home, I didn't feel at home, especially in a time of a pandemic where everybody was looking for some sort of safety or escape. It was as though I was out there, even though I wasn't out there. So this whole process was very interesting for me as an artist, to begin to question what we perceive or what we understood to be home. So yeah, and at the end, I was able to arrive at the fact that, home is something I carry with me everywhere I go. Maybe it's my flesh. I don't know. I'm still interrogating that. But then I found it's not geography and it's not architecture.
Yeah, I was going through your work, and is that work, the one that's called Home, is that something you created then during the pandemic, or is that before?
No,
Oh wow.
no.
So it's something
Home
that you
is,
questioned yourself before, I
yeah,
think.
it's something I question. Home is the project which I've done for a while. I think that was 2017. So it's way before the pandemic.
Okay.
But of course, home is some sort of space which is not fixed.
Difficult.
So we're in constant conversation with the idea of home. I mean, you're from Venezuela.
Yes.
I think you should be
Yes.
like the second person. I know from
Oh really?
yeah, and now you're in England. So we're all constantly being confronted with what is home, and finding ourselves in spaces where we're trying to connect to what is familiar about, for instance, in Germany, what is the connection between these two spaces, which are, at first seem so different, but then maybe over time, I'm able to connect to something that, reminds me of Nigeria, of Lagos, or, whatsoever. But yeah, so home is something that interests me, and it's something which I am constantly engaging with, both in thought and in practice.
Yeah, I found that question of what home is very interesting, because the same as you, I exist between a place that it's between Venezuela and England and Europe, and I don't feel like I quite belong in either of them anymore because I've been away from Venezuela for so long. So it's something that when I saw your project and the description, I was like, this is so relevant to me, because for so many of us, home is a state of mind. It's not a fixed place. I really like. I wonder if we could share a little bit of the project. I'm gonna share this screen, and if you could just tell us a little bit about, because this was just like a ritual or something that you recreated in was it in Germany or is this in Lagos?
Yeah, interestingly, it's there in Germany. It's in Düsseldorf. Way before I moved to Germany, so I mean, it's sometimes I find this sort of coincidence is quite interesting. How I'm making work in Germany about home, and now I live in Germany. I
Yeah.
mean, at the time, it's not something I could have thought of, or and I was on residency, I think, in 2017 in a theater and in Düsseldorf, and then we were supposed to engage with the colonial past of Germany, and so that felt so absurd to me. Oh, I'm from West Africa, which is Anglophone,
Yeah.
and I don't think I know everything about like the British colonialism. Who we have like direct experiences with. How much more like Germany? So I was really interested in how do I speak about what I don't know, and I love to make self-referential work. It's always about how do I respond to a space. So I began to look for what connects me to the city of Düsseldorf, which is quite alien. To me, it was my first time there at the time, and so I came in when there was this city carnival, and I mean I didn't understand Japan at the time, but it was so much about connecting into what I find familiar, which is the colors. And then I'm from the Yoruba culture where there's a whole lot of performances which has a whole lot to do with color, beliefs, rituals, and spirituality. So how do I localize my thought, my ideas, and my philosophy in the space is what I was trying to play with this work, to say for me to be able to be here I have to make it home, and to make it home is to project what is familiar, project my culture, to pick things which are familiar. So I took from the colors and I brought my own, you know,
Interpretation.
traditional practices into this performance and recreated it to, speak of the idea of home. And, so the project is Omis, ellipsis. Yeah.
I love the colors, and that it like home in your head. It doesn't exist really neither in Germany. Like you see this place and you don't necessarily think of Germany when you see it. And I think
Yeah.
that's one of the things I love the most about it, is just exists in your mind, and you get like a glimpse of what your mind and what your home looks like in your mind. It's really beautiful. And if we go as well to one of the other projects that I found really interesting, just internet slow. Transmutations. This journey for you, I found that in a lot of your projects, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you treat photography as a form of therapy. It's like to figure things out about your life and how you're feeling, and what it means for you to be a human. And that is something that I also do with my photography. So maybe I'm projecting on you, but this project for me, the way that you question yourself and what it means to be spiritual, then spiritual rebirth, was really interesting. And there's this sentence: spiritual death is necessary for the spiritual rebirth of a man or of men. And I think society as well right now is going to a sort of spiritual death and rebirth. And what does that look to you? Is that something that you reflect on your life, or is that something that is happening constantly? What does that spiritual rebirth look to you?
I mean, I tend to subscribe to a certain way of navigating the world. Firstly, as human, and I just seem to operate in a space where I know that there's something extraterrestrial outside of life as it is, outside of going to school, outside of capitalism, outside of business. I feel like there are higher forces which we don't necessarily see, but one way or the other influences how we choose to do things. And some people call it spirituality, some people call it science or whatnot. But I'm interested in transmutation, how we as humans evolve from one space to another, and some sort of alchemy where how we die multiple times, even though in a lifetime. And so all these ideas quite interest me as a person. And I also believe that we're a product of references. And most of the time, I tend to pick references from my own personal life. And that's a way of understanding also a collectivity. So for me to be able to relate to you, I have to understand myself first. And so I look at the person as a way of looking at the collective, which is why there's a whole lot of myself or my story in the work which I make. But they are not necessarily about me, even though my semblance is in this work. I mean, you say maybe you're projecting. You also found yourself in these things because you could relate to something. So, and that's like my approach to, present the personal as a way of looking at the collective. But the idea of rebirth, the idea of death, the idea of transmutation, transition, liminality has been some sort of preoccupation for me for throughout my practice. And if you look at my work from inception, something always connects to the next and to the next and to the next. Even and at first, this one conscious, there was just something there in the background processing, and then at some point I realized myself that oh my God, there's something that connects everything that I do, and it's to constantly look at this whole idea of rebirth, death, life. What is life? What does it mean to be alive? What is death? What happens after death? What is movement? What is liminality? What is purgatory? So those are the things which I like to think about, reflect about, and try to make work about. And I've been asked the same questions. I think last year or so, in an interview, as to, I mean, you're making things which it's quite relevant to what is going on in the world now, as though like the whole universe is going through some sort of dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about that? Are you surprised? Are you shocked? Are you? And in a way, I feel like even though this was my own moment of going through things which I was reflecting or expressing through my work, it was some sort of preparation for the time which we're in now, to not see it as a shock or resist it as though there's something normal we needed to go back to. But find ourselves in a place to say this is the new form in which we exist, and we must embrace it rather than resist it. To say, how do we engage with this new form? And that's helped me as an artist, as a person, to deal with the times of this pandemic, and also gives me a new way of relating to death, because I mean there's been so many deaths at this time, and I mean it's it's a time of grieving, it's a time of loss, but also it's a time of transition where things are changing to new form. So maybe a way to also look at it is not something totally negative, even though there's been love, but something transmuting into a new form, which if we learn to maybe open ourselves up a bit and engage with it, it's not totally awful.
Yeah.
I mean, it might
There's so
sound
many things not
utopic.
working already about society.
Yeah, it might sound a bit utopic, but yeah, that has helped me relate to the times we're in, to say we don't have control. The higher forces, like there's some sort of breach. The portal is open, and when it's time, everything comes to like some sort of karmic maturity. Maybe we will find some sort of normal in this new form. But I'm not necessarily sure life will go back to what it was, exactly what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned that we don't have control. What do you think as humans we do have control of then?
I mean, I don't personally, I don't think we have control
of anything.
of anything whatsoever.
Liberating.
I mean,
That's liberating.
we like to have control. We like to think we do, but at the end, nature is the most powerful, and I think like this is what this time is teaching all of us as humans. It's like confronting us with our own hubris to see that a virus can bring us all to our knees. So
That's right.
and that teaches some sort of humility and acceptance of the times to say, you know what, something defies your knowledge, your arrogance, your, so to speak, technology, and sometimes you can't even see it, but it's just there. And so that phenomenon is quite intense and also quite interesting and also quite humbling, to us as a collective. Yeah.
That's true. And also you mentioned that we are having to exist in this like capitalistic world, and I know that you've worked before in commercial work and you're also a designer. What is it like for you having to balance your commercial work and life with your art, and how are you able to do it? Because I'm also curious about that, because we all need to eat. But how do you make sure that you're not neglecting your art? 'Cause
I mean, I've always been an artist, and I think the bulk of my effort has gone to being an artist than trying to, um, work commercially. I mean, I also think, there's a commercial aspect to art also.
yeah,
So I don't really think there's a way to divide these things,
that's
and
right.
say, oh, I mean, if someone makes events, for instance, like weddings, shoot weddings and all these things, it's still an art form, and the fact that it pays every weekend does not negate the fact that it's still an art form.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I'm an artist, and then there's a commercial aspect to doing this also, which works for me to now. I'm not homeless, so it's working.
So for you,
So,
trying to find like where the two meet and being there in both, like being a creative in every aspect of your life, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, the boundaries are quite blurred for me, because I mean, if I wasn't making money, I would still be an artist. So I
Yeah,
mean,
of
that was a
course.
question which I've answered for myself for a long time. So even when I wasn't getting so much money or doing a lot of projects, I was still doing this. So this is life for me. So I relate to it in a very personal way, which is why it's so important to me, because it's also a way of seeing myself as some sort of medium that these things needs to come through. And so um, it's beyond how I relate to material things or just money. It's beyond, it's. I feel like I've transcended as an artist, as an human, transcended just about, oh, I need my work to sell in a particular way, so that I make this money. But I feel like my work is more important than whatever commercial value or money that it would bring to me, and so it puts me in a place where it grounds me. I mean, having that at the back of my mind grounds me as an artist, and so I would say I'm grateful for the privilege to be an artist that I want to be, because I think that's not talked about so much. But
That's true.
yeah, it's a privilege to want to be a certain type of an artist, and then you find yourself being what you want to be. So yeah, that's great for me.
Yeah, I'm having to question that myself during the pandemic, because also the government here in the UK, the funding that they've gone through like to the arts in the pandemic is not equivalent to all the other businesses, and also they are calling us, for a lot of people in the arts and other industries, to retrain and like find something that is more maybe lucrative, or that it's more essential, and you're having to define yourself in being essential or not essential worker, and then so having to stop and think like, okay, so why is art not essential, and like why is not the government not actually seeing arts as like something fundamental as humans, and also if we go deeper, also who is making art, like who is having to make art, like because the privileged and the rich people are going to keep making art no matter what, but like when you're taking that money and that funding away from the arts, who's really being attacked here. And it's like interesting to me that they've done that. What is it like in Nigeria? Like, is the government, does it put a lot of effort into funding arts, or is that something that?
Yeah, I mean, if we have to go into the hierarchies of needs and suffering, and then UK is going to look way, way better, because we don't have government support or funding or structure for art. So, as such, in a place of Nigeria, so artists are not getting funding, so that structure's never existed. So most of the time, most of the artists have had to look outside of, Nigeria for some sort of support. And people have to generate their own resources by themselves, work with galleries and all these things, which is very complicated in a space where, I mean, it's not like collecting or collectorship is so massive or so. So it's a different ballgame or a different challenge in a space like Nigeria and all these things. But yeah, just like as you mentioned, it's as though like culture is always like beneath the food chain, across societies and culture. And that's not to say I find any sense in this, because I feel, I mean, if you go out of your house and if you know you wouldn't walk out naked, then somebody made that design, somebody made that fabric, and that's art, and if you come up with your industrial design, somebody needed to fabricate this, that's art, and so sometimes we tend to relate to art in a very reductive way, because we think it exists just within the structures of museums and galleries and all these things, and we don't look at it as something that exists every day, and something that exists for us to survive, because it's still sometimes, I mean, there's so much extension as to science, but then to 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 bring science into a tangible form, you need art, I mean, to make it material, you need art, our science is some sort of abstract things, that exist in some sort of molecular structure and all this, so art, science, whatever, it's interwoven, and it's as important. People were locked down in their homes, they needed movies, theater, concert, and everything needed to happen. That's art. That's like, contribute to our well-being. And so when I belong to a couple of groups, when we have all these meetings online and people say, oh, I'm sorry to complain about how difficult it is for me because I can't go out and do my favorite things, and I'm feeling bad because I know some people are suffering. So, and I always say, if something contributes to to your well-being, and you're not able to do it, it doesn't matter if other people don't have food to eat. It's you're still as affected, because being able to go out to your favorite coffee shop, it's important for your well-being, for your mental. And so not being able to go to the museums or concerts, it's affected people, and that's because they've not been able to access art, and those are things that contribute to our well-being as humans. So yeah, art is quite important, and it's a shame that we think it's not essential. and I don't know what can be done about that, because it's always been this way. It's changing. Maybe the progress is slower, but yeah. So I'm not sure there's a solution to profile.
No, it's very complex. It's something that we won't resolve in a conversation. But in the workshops that you've done in Nigeria, who is attending the workshop? Is it young people? Is it people from all ages? Who is mainly attending the workshops, and what is something that you've learned? If it's mainly younger people, what is something that you've learned from the next generation that you're hopeful for, and the way they look at art?
So I guess I'll speak about the last workshop we had in Lagos, which is targeted towards women. It's just women, and across different social backgrounds.
Okay.
Because sometimes or most of the time, conversations around women, femininity, and, it's driven by certain types of people that belongs to different social strata, so to speak. And so my experience, for instance, is not the experience of a market woman, in, and I cannot assume because I'm a woman, I speak for them. And so and that happens all the time where we're representing women. Who are you representing? Because if you are educated or socialized in a certain way, your experience is not the same as another person from maybe a different ethnic group or economic class or another thing. So we were really interested in, even though, I'm an artist, and then art has always been like the entry point, but it was very interesting for me to have a space where women who were not even artists, but then, from like local and low income communities get to be part of our workshop, where we just sit and dialogue. So to bridge some sort of gap between us and listen to say, what are your challenges in your community? If we all occupy this city and because we were dealing with like the issue of insecurity in the city and the challenges of women navigating the city of Lagos. And so we wanted to hear other people's experiences. So we had like the creative aspect of the workshop where, we discuss art, we discuss the gaze, to say, yeah, we're women, we're creatives, we're making works, but, we need to investigate our gaze to say, why do I see things where I do? And where is this coming from? Because we have history, we have colonial history, and then we've all inherited a certain gaze, which is very white, and which we don't interrogate, And so even though we're locals, we still look at ourselves as, from a pedestal. So if I decide to work in the slum, my gaze is very white because I am standing on something to look at other people and not necessarily engage. And so to begin to question all these things, because sometimes it's so unconscious, is what you've inherited with, like, even the way your camera is made, that maybe it works better for a lighter skin or all these things because, these are not being produced in your locality. So these are things which, was we, discussed, because I believe in the space of conversations and dialogue, and then go into the city to try to work from, this new perspective or not so new perspective, whatever applies, and also bring these women into an informal workshop to have discussions, we had groups and that was very interesting because all the things which was discussed was brought together to create some sort of, preferred solution to what we think the problem is in the city, and make some sort of online campaign about this. So it might look as though, it's so little, but then I believe in the importance of, like, little effort. If 5 people are able to learn something from that, it's something. And they're able to influence other people, within their own groups, and so that this is like the format. And my my workshop is targeted towards women because there's the whole of marginalization. I mean, statistics of like women artists to like men, so it's much more important for priority to be given to women, and platform and space for growth, and and opportunities to be given to women, in a space like Lagos. So yeah, so that's what we are doing and we've been doing. Yeah.
Yeah, very important. Thank you so much. Yeah, I find that it's often not talked about, that gap there is between, even inside communities, that we think like, okay, because it's Nigeria, like but then the way that you exist in society, your social status, your race, the where people you surround yourself with, it all affects your art and your gaze, like you were saying. And even within the history of photography, yeah, we do need to realize that it has a very negative history as well. And once that you take that into consideration and then produce something with that in mind, I think it's very instrumental to anyone's practice as an artist. And then also, like you're saying, it builds a bridge between those communities as well. And I think it's very important. Like, if it impacts even one person within the group, imagine it can change someone's life. That's never a little thing, isn't it? And if we talk a little bit about your moving image, your videos, What made you do that, like skip, or is that something that you've always worked on, like photography and video have always come hand in hand for you?
Um, I've always been
I-
interested in, like,
I'm gonna stop
um,
because it's not working the video here with my internet. Sorry.
uh-huh. Okay, so I mean, a video has also been something that interested me, but for a long time I wasn't using the medium because I wanted to understand like still images, So I guess I got to a point where I just needed things to move. So I went along as started with cinemagraphs, which is like animation images, and then now I work more with like movie images, video, whatever it is, but quite experimental
Yeah.
in my approach. So I wouldn't say oh I'm a documentary filmmaker. I wouldn't say I belong to I have a genre or these things, but it's so much about experimenting and trying to also deconstruct like the structures that guides like what should be done, how it should be done. And I'm much more obsessed also with content. What am I saying? You know, why am I saying it? Why am I interested in it? So yeah, you know, I'm exploring like the medium of video now.
That's good. And then is it something you are gonna keep working on, or do you have something in mind for now? Like, is it something specifically you're working on right now, whether in photography, or I know you've been questioned about home more constantly, but do you have any new work that you can show us?
Um, I I started working during the pandemic in Lagos, Nigeria, and I was looking into the um, area boys subculture in Lagos, and so area boys are loosely organized gangs found in different parts of the city, and they are mostly people who come from like other parts of Nigeria into the city, and in search of a dream to say, oh, I'm gonna move to the bigger city, I'm gonna find myself a world here. And so being confronted with the reality of life in the city and the challenges, so they're on the west side, they run the informal sector of the public transport or like the um, informal security guards and all these things. So, but they're men, boys, age range you find in different areas of the city. And so the story um, around area boys is, has to do with a whole lot of the violent, the thieves, the this, the that, and that's what we always know. No, so it's always like you're very skeptical. You're, even like afraid of area boys. But of course, like the relationship with the city and these people is also very utilitarian. I mean, when you need somebody to do a dirty job, then you remember, oh, there's some boys in the area. Oh, we can get them to do this. So I was really interested in this. From I haven't lived in the city myself, and I wanted to understand and move closer and get to know an area boy through their own eyes. And so I started my research during the lockdown, because I mean, we didn't have, I was stuck then and not like we had anywhere to go. So I would walk around the area and get to meet, people, informal, ask questions, and so I started my project, which is also in collaboration with Focus Platform, which is a Berlin-based institution who pairs a mid-career artist or whoever with an established person. So I was privileged to work with a great German photographer, Tobias Ziloni, on my project. But yeah, I um, I was interested in intimately looking at people rather than I mean, I already have like a prejudice of what I inherited from being in the city myself, but I wanted something more to get to know people. And so I needed to leave my own anxiety at home to really engage with, people. And so this was a project that, was, such a long time of being there, sitting with people, being interested in their lives, sitting with them under the bridge, morning till evening. And what kind of music do they like? What do they eat? What did they do? Where did they live? And so as we build trust, I will, I get access into going into their homes and, knowing their lives, where did they come from, how long have they been in Lagos. And so I was really interested in the identity because, when you say area boy, it's so abstract. Who is an area boy? So it was so much about like making portraits of people. So I worked a lot with portraiture and um, also concerned about, how people, I mean, they've been portrayed in a certain way, but I wanted to see something else which presented itself to me in the course of like, working with people. So the project started Born Through Way. And then the next month, I think, the first weekend of April, we have a festival where the work will be screening. So it will be nice, you can join and then you get to see the project. Yeah.
That's really nice. So they got to see some of the images, the people that you work with?
Pardon me?
Did they get to see some of the images, the people that you work with, the area?
Yeah. They got to see. I mean, I just got back from Lagos 2 days ago. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Also, so which I was also continuing my work with, and yeah, in preparation for the festival in April. So yeah, they got to see, and we got to see each other after. I think I left after in the middle of the lockdown, sometimes July last year. So it's really nice to get to see the community. A lot has changed. Some people are gone, and to see what exists and how people have changed or whatever it is they do now, and being there with them in that space again, listening to their experiences and all of these things. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
and what is it like for them to have that because if you've talking to them, I'm guessing that they realize that what you want to do is to portray them in a different light than what they've been portrayed as, and bring this level of complexity that all humans have eventually. And so what was it like for them to have that channel with you, because you were trying to just converse with them as you would with any other person that and did they find it like rewarding? Like, did you find that they changed their attitude towards you after they realized what you were doing?
Mm. Um, I I think I personally I relate to making work in a way that I I'm not interested in having some sort of superficial reaction from people, which is why like my project is always like takes time because I mean, if it's something I needed to do in 2 weeks, people will post for me. So I needed to break that barrier.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted people to be themselves. I don't want them to be curated and work together because they can do that for me. So initially, yeah, I mean, we had this whole process. People are trying to be nice all the time, and but over time, that's all. I was interested in how the boundary breaks and people can be themselves. So if you're a mad person, it's a space where you could be mad. And just I related to my project as a witness. So I'm like, I'm here. So even if there's fight, I'm there witnessing, not, because as an artist also, and also personality also comes into it. Like I have my own strong opinions, but this is a space where I didn't want to project, what I think things should be. So if they want to be crazy, I allow it exist. So that at some point there was no space of like, oh, they're trying to be anything for me. They were just being who they were. And
Exactly.
if that comes with people fighting themselves and be violent, that existed. And when the sensitivity also comes, and one of the things which I found is that sense of collectivism, because when people exist in a space where they live on the borders of society, so there's a sense of not belonging. So it creates a sense of subculture of like people who come together to say, we are all we've got. And so I was interested in that collectivity and some sort of brotherhood. And so looking at the culture which also exists in a place like Lagos, which is like Yoruba, and also like 90%, or so to speak, 95% of these people are also from the Yoruba culture. I started looking into the city, up and how people perform collectivity, which is through the fabric. If I walk around the city, I understood why people wore certain type of fabric, and I, it's also a space where if you wear the uniform, or so to speak, of an event, you're allowed in. So it's some sort of, and so they have all these median events of just sitting and having drinks every weekend. So I thought, what if I introduce a uniform to this everyday get weekend sit down, let's have drinks, let's smoke and all these things. How does it change the temperament of even relating, and how does it change the performance? And so we had that, people, some of them who make music, they decided to make music. It was very informal and all this thing. So I made portraits of this event, or this activity also, with my work, and also people. And for to a large extent I avoided like space, because it's not, or geographical space, because it's also not what I wanted to look. I wanted to look at people specifically, and that totally changes also even my own perception of relating to other human beings, because I thought we were so different when I went into the community to do my work.
Yeah.
But at the end I realized we have a whole lot in common, and I'm equally as mad as the guy on the street. So
Yeah.
that was, because it's some sort of mirror that exposes your own primal energy, because these are people who live in such a primal way. And so so they don't function in our own structure. You don't tell people I'm going to be there by 8. They can decide we're not going to show up. You don't have
That's true.
anything. So it changes the dynamic of relating, because, and it's also about power. It's also about being a space where people felt powerless, over time. And then so it's not a space to impose. It's a space to flow, to say, okay, today people are too high, we're not going to do anything, and it's fine. We're just going to sit there today and just observe. Because I feel like all this energy, all this affect also contributes to the temperament work. So it's not so much about like photographing, but also learning about myself, learning about people.
Exactly.
Because the more I learn about them, the more I learn about myself. And so it was such an interesting project for me to do, and it's also one of the beautiful things which I think happened to me, during the pandemic. Yeah.
I really love the way that for you every project at the end of the day, it's also about finding yourself and like seeing yourself in the subject that you're portraying. And I feel like that's something that every artist should approach as well, because there should be that should be the reason that you're doing the project and the art, is just to find yourself as well. And I was wondering as well if you had thought of maybe doing some moving image or some audio with that, because it would be so interesting to listen to the conversations that you had with them and everything.
Yeah, I mean, my last trip to Lagos, which I arrived like 2 days ago, I was working just with sound.
Uh-huh.
And so the idea is to recreate, like, this whole gathering. And so it's going to be, it's a 4-channel sound installation, and when you sit, it's as though you're sitting under the bridge listening to people, just having their, regular conversation. So because also this is, I started with like images, and then I did video, and over time I realized I think it's important for people's voices, irrespective of what it is they're saying. So, because this is also a microaggression of, nobody ever listens to these people because like, what do they have to say? But then, and also to be conscious of the fact that nobody listens to these people because what do they have to say? Then in post, when we were doing the sound design in the studio, not to try to eliminate what somebody says, because I think it doesn't make sense. It does not have to make sense to me, but this is what was said. So to be conscious of that and not project my logic or trying to make sense of something because I think it doesn't make sense. It's also some sort of learning experience for me to say, we're putting this. I don't get it, but this is what was said, and that was, quite an interesting process in the work. So we have some sound installation, video, and images, as part of the project, and the project is titled "Born Throw Away," which is a pidgin English, to burn, to give, to throw away, to throw. So it's, this is like a pidgin English term we use, or people use in Nigeria, to refer to people who maybe don't fit in a certain way, or they would call it sex worker, born throw away. Like, you could have just given birth and throw you away because you're useless because you do this. Oh, you're in the streets, then you're born throw away. So and I was just interested in, interrogating that word and life and that structure and understanding people who exist in this same, in this space, in this on the edge of society, who don't belong one way or the other in the mainstream culture or the, the main culture. And also maybe to come to a point to say maybe there's a bunch of way inside everybody, irrespective of where you belong, And so that's like the project, I'm quite excited about it myself, and
Yeah, I'm
so
excited
yeah.
too. It sounds amazing. Yeah, especially because I mean, also, is this the first time that you work something like documentary? That's something that you've approached a project like this, or have you done something like this before?
Yeah, I documentary. I think I did a documentary work on um on the life of a man who sells newspaper in Lagos. That's a couple of years ago, like 2012 or 13. I have to be sure. And it's, I'm very interested in zooming in, you know, so rather than have like five people sell there, I want to know the life of one person, and I observe and I follow, his life. Where does he live? Where did he come from? How long is he so, in the newspaper under the bridge? How early does he wake up to go to? So I followed him all through this whole process, you know. And at the end of the day, I made an edit of like a day, or say a day in this life of this person who sells newspaper, a day in the life of Orange. So that's like a one documentary thing which I've done. And also to look at the community, because I'm really interested in this rural or urban migration. I'm really interested in like migration, and then even though it's still Nigeria, but then people move from other parts of Nigeria to Lagos, and so there's like a northern community in Lagos, people who come from the northern part of the country, and what do they do? What kind of business? Well, what structures? Who's the leader? And all those things. So it's also an intimate portrait of a community in living in Lagos, and this whole idea of like um, acculturation. How does Lagos rub off on people who are not Yorubas, who are not Lagosian? And I'm very interested in this mixtures in this thing. So those are like the documentary related work which I've done, in the past. But I guess like for me, there's always like the boundary between like documentary and fiction, and projection, which always comes into play, because at the end of the day, what I choose to see is some sort of filter. I mean, if I say white scene and I say, oh, this is what I'm going to look at, so I'm interested in why am I looking at this and not that. So it's some sort of ongoing investigation of what's changing about the city, what's changing about people, because of course if you go to the northern part of Nigeria, the way people, even though they're from the north, but the way they relate in Lagos is not the way they would relate. So what has changed, and how is that the city influenced people? And in the Yoruba culture is very extravagant. It's party, something they call ashrebi, which is people wear the same fabric. And then this is not really a northern culture, but now you see people also have their own parties and have all these fabrics of the same patterns and color, and so elaborate. And so people from the community said, this is not our thing, this is Lagos, and now see we're doing it. So it's also quite interesting to see how people you know acculturate, if there's a word like that, a culture, whatever.
Yeah, amazing. Yes, I mean, I think that thing you were mentioning about fabric and the way you dress representing something really important in Lagos, and the way that people interact with each other, that is really interesting to me as well, because I think that functions in other parts of the world as well. So yeah, and like who is allowed in, if you're wearing a certain attire, where are you allowed to go in, and the way you dress, it's very interesting. Maybe you should do a project about that. um, and maybe to end, I really like Nigerian female writers. I've read a few of them, and I was wondering if you had any other recommendations that you can give me, something that to look forward to discover. If you have any favorite writers, Nigerian writers, that you can recommend.
Who have you read?
I've read Chimamanda obviously, because she's the more famous. I've also read the author of my sister's serial killer. I just can't remember her name right now. Yeah, it was about. It was by Ojinkan Braithwaite.
Oh yeah, Orinka Braithwaite.
Yeah. So and I love their writing and the way they express their realism and the way they describe food and culture. I just find I feel close to home when they talk about those things. And I was wondering if you had any recommendation.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I think you should look into Sefi Atta. Yeah, she's written novels and play. I just typed the name Sefi Atta in the, and then if you like, plays, you should read Lola Shunen's play, also, books. And yeah, so I can look for a couple of also like younger, new generation writers, and maybe compile a list and send to you via email. But I love the writing. Pardon me?
I would love that. I would love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you for talking to me today and having the time to chat with me. I really, really appreciate it. Your work is amazing, and I'm looking forward to see what else you do.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's nice talking to you, and I'm glad to be able to do this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Wishing you all the best in your endeavors also. Oh, nice dog. Hi.
And I wish you all the best.